I'm really happy to be here to tell you about how we think you could get credit and recognition for method development. My name is Gabriel Gasque, and I am Head of Outreach in Protocols.io. And before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a PhD in experimental neuroscience, and I did my postdoc in neurogenetics. And before joining Protocols.io to promote the practice of open methods, I was an editor in the open access journal PLOS Biology for 9 years. I would also like to share some housekeeping information with you before we delve into the main content of the presentation. As mentioned before, I am recording this presentation and I will share the recording and the slide deck with all registered participants. Also, closed captioning has been enabled, so feel free to turn it on if you want to use it. I plan to speak for some 40 to 45 minutes, leaving at the end some time for questions, but you can start typing them at any moment in the chat or in the Q&A windows of Zoom. And finally, while this is a protocol about getting credit, you can find more introductory webinars or more protocols focused on advanced features of the platform by visiting protocols.io/webinar, and you will see the upcoming webinars there and you can sign up. Also, in the last URL, there is a link for you to request a one-to-one demo at any point if you have any question about the platform. Now, with the housekeeping out of the way, we can start with today's agenda, which you should be able to see on the screen. We will talk a little bit about the history of reporting methods and of method development and optimization, not getting the recognition as worthy of standalone publication and not getting the credit that it deserves. But that started to change about 20 years ago as methods started being recognized as an important modular output of research. We will also cover the different ways of sharing and getting credit in Protocols.io. So, for the first part, let's go a little bit back in history. The journal Nature Methods was actually started only 20 years ago in 2004. And the excerpt that you see at the bottom of this screen is from the inaugural editorial, in which the founding editor said that their goal was to create a highly visible forum for the presentation of novel methods, because major methodological developments take their roots in their cross-fertilization of different disciplines. By contrast, the methods sections of specialized journals, although extremely useful for the targeted peer groups, do not grant technical information the wide exposure conducive to interdisciplinary exchanges. And we will touch on this a little bit more later on. But behind the scenes, what we learned from the founding editor-in-chief of Nature Methods, Veronique Kiermer, who later became Chief Scientific Officer at the Public Library of Science, is that there was a lot of skepticism, even in Nature Publishing Group, around launching Nature Methods, because they said that Nature publishes research and that nobody was going to read just methods, and that these could dilute their brand, and that it will be impossible to fill a journal's pages with just methods, and so on. However, as we all know, Nature Methods has been a huge success. But it is interesting to think about the skepticism of giving methods independent credit as recently as 2004. But if we look more recently, within the last 10 years, there are a lot of journals now focusing on and publishing protocols and methods. Some examples are shown in this slide, and the list is definitely not exhaustive. Big publishers like Springer Nature keep expanding their portfolio of methods-centered journals, like Nature Protocols, 2 years after they launched Nature Methods, and they recently acquired us, Protocols.io. And Elsevier, that launched Star Protocols and Methods X. And there are some other independent initiatives like Jove, Bioprotocols, and some others. It seems, therefore, that we are now in a place where journals, funders, and many researchers have started to realize it is not just code and data that we should be sharing. In that sense, you might recall that it was in the late 90s when we're starting to move away from please contact authors for code and data to use specialized data and code repositories like GitHub, Dryad, Figshare, and Open Science Framework. And although methods have been playing catch-up, sharing them is becoming the norm, and you have now more choices on where and how to communicate those methods. But that's enough about the changes that we have seen in recent years. I will want to talk now about public sharing and getting credit for reproducible and discoverable protocols. And specifically about protocols, we will go through first how most people share their methods in protocols.io, which is actually independently of papers. Then we will talk about the partnership that we have with PLOS ONE, BMC Methods, Nature Protocols, and Lab Animal to get your protocols peer-reviewed and published as formal peer-reviewed manuscripts, as well as the many partnerships and connections that we have with many other journals which aim to make your papers more rigorous and more reproducible. So, when we see how scientists communicate their work and their discoveries to their colleagues and to the world more broadly, we have started to see a more modular approach to science communication. So at the center of this cartoon, we have the most recognized research output, which is the peer-reviewed publication, the paper. This is the bread and butter, the currency that you put on your CVs and that funders and your employers look at when evaluating your productivity. But we now appreciate more the value of other independent but interrelated modules of research output, like code and data, and we have created specific repositories for these, like GitHub, Open Science Framework, Zenodo, Dryad, and so on. Methods are another module of research output. And in fact, methods are really the linchpin to reuse. And the ongoing value of all the other items here hinges on having the methods. Because I venture to claim that it is really difficult, if not impossible, to understand the meaning of the data and any interpretation of the data if we do not understand the details of how these results were acquired. And this is where protocols.io comes in, because we are an online open access repository and a platform for authors to create, share, and publish detailed, dynamic, interactive, and reusable protocols before, during, and after publication of a research article. And I would need to clarify here that what we understand as publication in protocols.io is similar to preprinting an article in bioRxiv, for example. We are a repository for methods, not a peer-reviewed journal. For journals, publication is different because for them, it is the result of a peer review process. However, as we will discuss later on, protocols posted in protocols.io are citable and can be part of a peer-reviewed publication or even be peer-reviewed as stand-alone methodological papers. So if you're not familiar with protocols.io at all, please take a look at the URL at the bottom of this slide. This link will take you to the welcome page, which is a great place to start familiarizing yourself with the platform. As I said before, one of the features of protocols.io is its open access repository, in which there are now over 18,000 published protocols, and they are all published under a CC BY license, making them completely open access and free to read, use, and reuse. In this open access platform, it is also free to create an account and to publish protocols in the open access repository. But there are also over 65,000 private protocols which have been created by users who are developing, optimizing, and perhaps just sharing their protocols with their immediate colleagues. And this is our business model. As we charge institutions for these private collaborative workspaces, and many universities, funders, and other institutions have such licenses. The free accounts have a limited number of private files. So if you make your protocols and publish them right away, the free account can work for everyone. But we charge for users to take advantage of unlimited private space. And something that I want to point out is that last year alone, more than 2 million people came to the repository to read the public protocols. And most of these public protocols are not linked to any specific peer-reviewed article. They are simply sitting in protocols.io. And we will talk about people's motivations to share independently of a paper. But what I want to point out is that despite this independent sharing, there is a lot of traffic to the protocols. About 60% of all traffic to these public protocols comes directly from Google searches, which means that people are organically finding them. And geographically speaking, when we look at our own analytics, we see that only about 30% of the traffic to our protocols comes from the United States, and the rest is from all over the world, which means there is a really global reach once you publish the protocols in the platform. And when you come to protocols.io, you can search directly if you want to look for specific protocols that might be useful to your research. And these protocols can be run directly, or you can create your own forks or editable copies of someone else's published protocols, which then you can tweak for the equipment you have in your lab or for a different cell type, for example, which might save you a lot of time and energy because you will have all the comprehensive details of the previous approach right there straight away. Protocols.io also has some open communities as well. These are set up as workspaces. So if you have used protocols.io, you have your own private workspace. But some of these are open for all to join. So you can also look for workspaces that represent communities that might be relevant to your research. And you can join those if you want to have a faster view of what people are working on in that space and the ability to interact and engage with those researchers who are also members of the group. And before we continue, I want to show to you how the protocols created and published in protocols.io are live, dynamic, interactive, reusable, yet persistent documents that go far beyond what a traditional static PDF offers. So I'm going to be opening one of these protocols. Let me try to open the protocol. Okay. Okay, here we have this protocol. Because it has been published, it has received a DOI, making it permanent and citable. The protocol itself is written in a recipe-like step-by-step fashion and can be supplemented or enriched with pictures, images, and even videos that you can play during your protocol to make it more didactic. Different sections of the protocol can be coded in different colors, creating a table of content that I can navigate. The protocols are interactive documents because anyone can come and type a comment or a question, and the authors will be notified, and they can come to the platform to respond to that comment or question. As I mentioned before, you can create your own editable fork or copy of this protocol to change those steps that you need to change to make it work for your own condition. If you have a different equipment or a different cell line, or you need a different temperature. The protocols are versionable. In this case, the authors have created different versions of the protocol, and I can even ask the platform to compare two versions side by side. And I can run the protocol directly from the computer or tablet. So as I make progress in the protocol, I can tick every step as done. If I want to add a comment or an annotation to a specific step because something went wrong, or I want to add some data, I can do that. I can save my comment. And when I finish running my protocol, I can save it as an independent file with a timestamp. Now, let me go back to my presentation. Sorry. Okay. So let's talk about the rewards that come with publishing detailed methods. Not necessarily in order of importance, but a first reward for making your methods public is that, going back to the concept of modular communication of research outputs, by using specialized repositories for publishing your methods, you are increasing their discoverability and potential reuse, which should lead to increased credit and recognition. And I would like to use an example here from X, previously Twitter. So you can see a tweet here from a researcher who was looking for a protocol for RNA extraction from primary cortical neurons in culture. Someone responded this tweet and recommended a protocol that is in protocols.io. But this specific protocol was actually part of a paper that was published in the journal GigaScience. Now, the paper is about a fish parasite, so the chances of researchers working on primary cortical neurons in culture finding a paper on a fish parasite as a means of finding a method that would work for them seem really slim. But because the protocol was published independently in a specialized repository, it made the method more discoverable and increased the chances of people reusing it. And once a protocol is published, the platform in the tab called Metrics keeps record of all traffic and use of this protocol, including number of views, bookmarks, copies, comments, and citations that the protocol has received. And an obvious second reward for publishing methods is that it increases your reproducibility, not only in the field, but also internally in the work that you do in your own laboratory. So if you're not familiar with this, I will introduce to you the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project, which was a $1.5 million initiative coordinated by the Center for Open Science and by Science Exchange with the goal of trying to independently replicate almost 200 experiments from about 50 high-profile papers on cancer biology. What the Reproducibility Project researchers discovered very soon after the project began is that it is very difficult to replicate published work. There are several reasons why this is the case, but one of them is that the original researchers didn't document in their articles with enough detail what they did and how they did it. So what you see on the screen is the Center for Open Science website that summarizes some of the results of the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project. And as you can see, of the 193 experiments that they tried to replicate from 53 articles, 0% of the protocols were completely described, which made it impossible to reproduce them without contacting the original authors. Equally striking, when researchers from the Reproducibility Project contacted the original authors, they also discovered that these did not always could tell how their own experiments had been done. Therefore, the problem of lack of reproducibility goes beyond the lack of adequate reporting in published articles, but also highlights deficiencies in the way researchers keep record of their own experimental protocols for housekeeping. And that brings me to a third reason to make your protocols public, which is to guarantee preservation. As we all know, a large fraction of the lab personnel is floating. Students graduate and leave, postdoctoral researchers become faculty elsewhere, and so on. Publishing your protocols makes them persistent, citable objects that will be permanently stored in your workspace as well as in the open access repository. And I should mention that all private and public content in protocols.io is mirrored and backed up in Clocks, GitHub, and the Internet Archive. and that the Chan Zuckerberg initiative has a code escrow of the platform. And modular sharing of protocols also increases the chances of establishing collaborators, as we have seen cases where researchers report that publishing these detailed protocols early on leads to an increase in the number of collaboration. And one important thing that I want to note is that since we launched in 2014, and now with these more than 18,000 published protocols, we have never seen a case of a publisher saying that because you shared your methods in protocols.io, you cannot publish your research paper in their journal. Publishers do not consider publishing in protocols.io prior publication. So just like sharing preprints in bioRxiv, sharing in protocols.io is like preprinting methods. So we have never seen a case of that hurting authors. So we encourage people to share publicly whenever their protocols are ready. So from the publishing perspective, sharing on protocols.io should give your method visibility, let you engage with the people who are using the method, make it a central place where you can iterate and share corrections and optimizations easily, and guide everyone naturally to those new versions. And it does not preclude further recognition by publishing that method later on as part of a peer-reviewed publication. And that takes me to the fact that publishing your protocols should simplify your work down the road when the time of submitting and publishing a paper comes. So let me use another example again from X. Here we have Professor Jonathan Kipnis at the Washington University in St. Louis, the United States, tweeting and saying, "What if labs publish each of their unique methods or protocols, and in future papers, instead of rewriting the protocols, we just cite them?" And he adds, "We waste so much time on methods by saying the same thing differently." And that is exactly what protocols.io is about. You can publish your updated, detailed research protocols in the open access repository, obtaining DOIs. Then anyone, you or your colleagues, can cite those protocols. But citing detailed protocols goes beyond saving time, but not rewriting methods. Citing and using detailed protocols improves rigor and reproducibility, making your paper more robust and impactful. And this is what the authors of this PLOS Biology paper did. They created, deposited, and published their protocols in protocols.io, obtaining a citable DOI, which they included in the materials and methods section, replacing most of the writing. The reader, by following the link in the red square, has access to the detailed step-by-step protocol in protocols.io. And a really nice thing about how protocols.io works is that the protocols are versionable. So if the authors have updated their protocol since the time of publication, the reader will be notified and can choose to read the protocol as it was published, which is now highlighted in gray, or read the newer version by following the link that says view the newer version, or they can read both. And that brings me to the fact that because there is a push for reproducibility, there are now over 500 journals, some open access, some subscription journals that encourage authors in their submission guidelines to include in their manuscript a link to the detailed protocol in protocols.io. And this also applies to many funders, now encouraging or requiring detailed method sharing. And remember that I said that we have never had an issue with authors not being able to publish a paper for publishing their protocols first. In fact, not only do journals not see a conflict with publishing your protocols in protocols.io, they often actively encourage the use of the platform. And before we move on to the next section, I would like to show you how easy it is to publish a protocol in protocols.io. So I'm going to be opening my own personal account. As you can see, I have many files and folders stored. I can choose any protocol to be published. I highlight it. I click publish. And then I just have to complete 6 very easy steps before I make my protocol public. We don't peer review, so your protocol is only screened very lightly and is usually made public within 24 hours. In addition to publishing a protocol, you can also reserve a DOI without making the protocol public or post a draft, which is a work in progress. And I would like now to move on to the third point in the agenda, which is a very specific partnership that we have established with 4 peer-reviewed journals and which fits within this narrative of the methods renaissance, because the idea is to bring more credit and recognition to method development. So, and the idea is that your protocol published in protocols.io can be submitted to BMC methods, nature protocols, PLOS ONE, or Lab Animal for peer review and eventual publication as a methodological paper. Now, each journal has a different scope and different editorial criteria, but we offer you 4 options for you to choose. Now, I want to clarify that if you have a publishable protocol, you do not have to necessarily submit to any of these 4 journals. We offer you the option, but you know your field and you know your audience, and you know what journal would be the best fit. As I mentioned before, over 500 scientific journals explicitly endorse protocols.io. But with these 4 journals, we have a close relationship that should facilitate submission. And because our partnership with PLOS ONE is the oldest, I will use this one as an example. The result of the partnership between protocols.io and PLOS ONE meant that PLOS ONE created a new article type called Lab Protocol. And this collaboration is about turning your protocol in protocols.io into a peer-reviewed publication. So PLOS ONE is a pretty broad, welcoming journal. And one of the reasons we are excited about this partnership is that the way they have defined the scope is that they are not expecting new experimental results. And they are welcoming to new protocols that might be extensions of something that has already been reported. And the idea is that if you already publish a method, or someone else did, but your work has been to troubleshoot or optimize it for example, a new condition, that this work of optimization and tweaking can be recognized. So with this collaboration, both Plus One and Protocols.io aim to grant credit not only to the development of a whole brand new method, but also to the hard work put into optimizing and troubleshooting a protocol to make it work more efficiently or in a new condition. So the bar is set in a way that it recognizes a good and useful protocol. There should be some effort behind it, of course, but the idea is to capture the constant method development that very often goes unacknowledged and is usually just summarized in one or two sentences in the materials and methods section of manuscript. And this integration between Plus One and Protocols.io is meant that the protocol is front and center of the paper. And this other paper is an example of a protocol paper published in BMC Methods. BMC Methods is an open access, peer-reviewed journal that focuses on publishing lab protocols and methodology papers in the natural sciences, including biology, chemistry, physics, computation, and biomedical sciences. The journal serves as a platform for researchers to disseminate experimental procedures, novel techniques, and innovative methodologies, promoting reproducibility, transparency, and the advancement of scientific methods. And now, moving on to the last part of the talk, which is about partnerships that we have with other publishers. So I would like to start by saying that although we are all very familiar with supplementary files and documents in papers, there's a strong push for a number of years now to move away from supplements by using repositories instead. And this is a really good article in the magazine The Scientist about it. And if you are interested, you can read it by following the URL at the bottom of the slide. But these are just some examples of papers that are published and the journals promoting posting of the detailed protocols in protocols.io. And this is now the kind of modular publishing that we have started seeing more and more, where the paper is the centerpiece. It is the story, but you have data in NCBI, Open Science Framework, or other appropriate repositories. The code is in GitHub, for example, and now we are starting to see more and more of the methods also going into a repository. And we're seeing some trend in scholarly publishing, moving away from vague methods sections to more rigorous, more reproducible method reporting. And as I mentioned before, a published protocol in protocols.io with an assigned DOI is a citable object that can be referenced to in a paper, giving credit to the author's methodological work. Now, the reference will also be linked to the protocol in the platform, so the reader will have access to the interactive step-by-step protocol, even if the paper was published behind a paywall. And I want to highlight that doing a good job at reporting your methods should increase the impact of your papers, as these data show. What we see here is a study showing that for faculty, when reading research papers, they value method section just second to results. So what we see here is that these are results, either figures or text, and methods are just second in value. because these are tightly linked and are needed to the correct interpretation and the reproducibility of the results or data. So to summarize, you can read in this slide some of the rewards and benefits of openly sharing protocols and linking these to your research articles. And with that, I will be happy to take some questions. And I saw that there are already some comments. Well, thank you so much for the comments. Yes, so Evan Shang is mentioning if you're going to get the recording later on. Yes, so I will be sending the recording. I am based in California, the United States, so it's almost 9 p.m. for me. But tomorrow I will be sending the recording to all of you and the slides. So both the recording and the slides. Paola, I see that you have a question. Would you like to type the question in the chat or in the Q&A window? Or let me see. I'm going to allow you to talk. You should be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, that's great. So much easier. Typing is the extra effort. So thank you so much, Gabriel. It was great introduction. And questions that I have are mostly, I have already popped some questions to the main inbox. And I don't know if you have all the answers. They're just raising questions for future. Maybe we can answer them in the future. But so the questions are about the protocols. The authorship of the protocol. So, for example, what I do is that I do a lot of reading of novel research, and a lot of the protocols in the research papers are not written up as protocols. So, what I have done in the past is that I extract the protocol from a research paper, which has been normally validated, tested, and which is credible enough, and I published it as a protocol. And I was the author of the protocol, but the research was done by someone else. And I obviously indicated that this protocol was taken from this paper. And do you think that is, and in some cases, however, I do change the protocol. So I take somebody's protocol, I modify it, and I put it up as an experimental protocol. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Do you have any advice? Because I think this service is very useful because there is a variety of methods which are not innovative in a number of fields, from medicine, science, but also engineering and new practice like digital publishing and all sorts of things, which I think would benefit from being written up as a very short recipe-like form. But ultimately, we are not the authors. We do not own the method.
So let me see if I understood your question. So we have two cases. In one of them, you go to a paper that has been published, you take the method section, which is usually a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, and you transform that into a protocol, into a step-by-step protocol, but the content itself hasn't been modified. And the second case is that you do the same, but you actually optimize the protocol to make it work better for you. And your question is whether you are the rightful author in both cases. Did I understand your question correctly?
Yes, Gabriel, perfectly. Thank you.
So I would say yes. I think that you are the rightful author because you are formatting, even in the case in which the content hasn't changed, you are formatting the protocol. You are giving it the dynamic and interactive nature of the platform. That being said, a scholarly approach is to cite the original publication, which you already mentioned that you do. And I would even go further and probably in the abstract, or there's also option to add a disclaimer. You can say it both in the disclaimer and in the abstract that the protocol is exactly as reported previously, and you are just typesetting it to the format of protocols.io. In the second case, that is actually your own protocol. You took inspiration of something that was published before, but you optimize it. So you have to cite the previous publication, but I don't think that any further clarification is needed other than saying, that you took inspiration in something that was already published. But all research is built upon somebody else's contribution, right? Like we always build either a method or an idea based in somebody else's discoveries. I hope, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, Gabriel, and I thank you because I just wanted reassurance because this is the first time that I get to speak to someone in with voice or in person. And let me add that please consider this as a feature request. I don't know if you have the feature because it would be, I think protocol is the system is really fantastic and advanced. And I know that it's in progress. And I wonder, wouldn't it be nice to notify the author of the original automatically saying, hey, I made a protocol out of your paper. So because the citation is there, there's the infrastructure. It looks like the system builds and taps and it ports, so to speak, ports to a bigger research infrastructure. That is my understanding basis on the system analysis so far. And so wouldn't it be nice to have a feature that when you cite somebody else's paper for your protocol, they could be automatically notified? And maybe there is already, in which case, let me know.
No, we don't have that feature. I think that's a good idea. I will discuss it with the rest of the team and see how it can be implemented.
Thank you
Sometimes
so much. Yeah.
sometimes changes that seem easy might not be. I am not myself an engineer, so I don't know how, but let me discuss it with the
Yeah,
team.
I am an engineer, and I think this could be probably I think from what I've seen, the capability is already there. It just needs to be, written up a bit. But thank you so much for taking the suggestion into account.
But something that I would encourage you to do is that if you feel that that you are reusing a protocol that has already been published, in the meantime, while we develop this feature, you could on your own reach out to your colleagues and say,
Of course,
like
of course.
I want to do that. I hope you're okay, right?
By
Because
all means.
that will make the protocol more reusable and more discoverable, right? And you will be citing them. So again, I think that if you modify the protocol, that is your protocol. You should cite, but you own it. Even if you change one parameter, that's your protocol, right? And in the first case, which is you are just translating the format or you're reformatting from a paragraph to a step-by-step recipe like, I think it would be collegial to reach out to them and say, hey, this is what I did. Um, and it's you are cited is based on your protocol, but I want it to be reused.
Yeah, because I think maybe the people who do the research, scientists and researchers, maybe not all of them, based on my experience, are really oriented into or making their research discoverable. People are really concerned, focused, and their energies are completely taken up in doing the work, publishing it. Then they forget and move on. So if somebody reuses that and makes that, publishes that online, sorry, Did you mention, Gabriel, by the way, are all the protocols open access or not? I forgot.
Everything that we publish is open access CCPY.
So you see that I think there is a slight possible legal conflict there, which maybe you want to look into. So engineering-wise, it should be a easy trick. But if the protocol is owned and you republish it with a different license, I don't know. You're gonna have to advise me on that.
But I understand what you're saying. But as I mentioned before, if the protocol, so like the journal doesn't own the knowledge, right? They own the text. If the protocol
Okay.
was published in a different license, like if
so
you make a
cool.
discovery and you publish your discovery, even if it's published with a closed license, anyone can take that discovery and build upon it. So they cannot take the graphs, they cannot take the test, but they can take the knowledge.
Thank you so much for that reassurance, Gabriel. That's fundamental stuff.
So if you take a paragraph and you transform that paragraph into a recipe, because none of the methods usually come in a recipe. So if you take that paragraph and you retype it and change the wording, then you are not breaking copyright laws. The journal
yeah.
But you always have to give attribution, right? You always have to give attribution to the original authors. That is scholarly behavior.
So what you're saying, Gabriel, just one final point to this, that because I thought that people owned methods. This is the whole point of patents. You publish a method, then you say, this is my method. And I mean, I am very happy to know that I can do this because, as you say, we do this all the time. We take existing methods and we work on them or use them or we publish them or we work them. But technically speaking, isn't a method, even if you change the wording, the actual method, isn't it?
Well, the product of a recipe, like the product of a method when you discover a drug, what is copyrightable is the final end product. I don't think that this has been litigated with methods itself, but in the case of recipes, the recipes are not copyrightable. So the specific step to make a final product is not copyrightable. You can have a patent on a product, on a derivative, but not on the method itself.
Okay, I take you for it and I check it out. And I think this is the only really thing that worries me when I create protocols. And I'm going to be creating protocols like mad. So thank you so much.
Any other question from anybody else? I'm going to stop the recording just in case somebody wants to ask a question of the record.